G'day and welcome back to the tank tutorial video here. We're going to be making the enemy spawn in today. So let's have a look at creating a controller for this little game. I'm going to call this object enemy tank controller, and I don't need a sprite for this. There's not going to be any sprite. What this is going to do is it's going to make the enemy tanks spawn in at a random location outside of the room. So it's going to be pretty straightforward here. We're going to add an event. Oops, the create event. Okay, and in this create event, I'm going to set an alarm. Now, the best way to set an alarm without explaining arrays is just to do it in here. Now, arrays are level 2 in the New Zealand curriculum when it comes to digital technology. So I'm going to keep them out of this video, and instead we're going to use these alarm drops. So what I'm going to do here is there's a little bit of a fundamental understanding of timers and frames per second and things that we need to understand here. So if you remember from early videos, the number of steps per second is the same as the number of frames per second. So however many frames you're getting, that's the number of steps per second. And in here, I've got mine set to 60 FPS, and I'll just open up a room to show you that is set to 60 in there. So this room is set to 60. The default is 30. You probably want to set yours to 60 now. Most games, 60 FPS is a lot better. It looks a lot smoother. There is a big difference. So I'm going to set it to 60. So what I want to do is I'm actually wanting this alarm to pretty much go off straight away as soon as the game starts. So I'm going to leave that at, I'm just going to put it at 1 in alarm number 0. You can have up to 11 different alarms. I think in code you may be able to have more. I'm not sure. Sorry, there's 12 different alarms there, including 0. So alarm 0 to 1. Then I'm going to add an event, an alarm 0. So when alarm 0 goes off, I'm going to create some objects. Now here's where it's going to get a little bit tricky, because I want to create some objects outside of the room. So let's have a look at how this code might actually look. And this is going to be the first one where I haven't really prepared the code beforehand. Instead, I need to think about what it is that I want it to do and use the functions that are available to me. I'm going to use if statements, and I'm going to use or introduce a new function called choose. And choose will allow me to choose. I'm also going to use random underscore range. So I'm going to use a bunch of functions here that will allow me to choose different values. So let's start here. I'm going to have side equals choose 1, 2, 3, 4. And what this is going to do is it's going to assign one of these values to side. So side is just going to be, we'll make it, 1 is going to be we'll make it go from the right like it normally does. So 1 is going to be the right, 2 is going to be up, 3 is going to be the left, 4 is going to be the bottom, and that's the side that the tank's going to come in on. So for this, if side equals 1. Now the double equals here, I haven't used before, but it's a comparison. In GameMaker, it will allow you to do this, but no other programming language that I'm aware of that's used for level 1 NCA. So some people using Java, JavaScript, C#, and the Python. A single equal sign is always an assignment. So what that means is I'm assigning the value that it chooses to this variable. Double equal sign is a comparison. I'm saying, is this equal to this? And it's either going to be true or false. So if it is equal to 1, then I'm going to create, I'm going to make two variables, rx equals random underscore range, and we're going to go from 100 to room width minus 100. So that's going to be random x. So if I go back to here, it's going to go from about here to about here. It's going to pick a number in between 100 and room width minus 100. And then the y value y, I'll call it ry, equals negative, and I've kind of got this wrong, so I'll change this in a second. Ry equals negative 40. It's going to be outside the room. And I'll make it negative 64. Because I think the size of my tank is 64 pixels, so I'll just make sure it's out of the room. Now negative y, and even though I said that 1 was over here, I'm just doing it for this here. So I'm going to change that to 2, and I'll do 1 in a moment. So y, if this is 0 for y, this whole black line here, negative y is going to be above that, going up this way. Okay, positive y is all the way down here, all the way down to 768 and then beyond. So negative y is up here. I want my tank to appear about here, and then it will start trundling into the room. And then I can use the function called instance create, and I give it down the bottom here. It tells me what it needs. It tells me what two parameters or arguments it needs. It needs an x value, which I'm going to say rx is the value, and it needs a y value, ry. And it also needs an object to create, which is object enemy tank. So that's for the top. Now each of the other sides is pretty much going to be the same code with a few things changed around. So I'll go ahead and change these, and I'll put some comments here. So spawn a new tank. And then this one here, spawn a tank at the top of the room. And I'm going to change this to right of the room because this is going to be 1. Now Rx is going to be room width plus 64. Okay, so if this is the room width here, I want the tank to appear over here. So room width plus 64, it's going to appear somewhere out there on the X value. The Y value, however, I want to be random. There's GameMaker. So the Y value is going to be random range 100 to room height minus 100. Okay, and then it will create that tank. In fact, this code, I'm going to delete this code because I'm just repeating myself. And I'm going to put it down the bottom here. Instance create rx, ry, object, enemy, tank. And so you can see it's going to do one of these things here. So we'll do 3. Set left coordinates. This one here, set top coordinates. And this one here, set bottom coordinates. So it's only going to do one of these. It's going to choose a side, 1, 2, 3, 4. If side equals 1, if side equals 2, which is the top, if side equals 3, which is the left. So for this one, it's pretty much going to be the same as this, except the left-hand side, which is this one, I'm getting a bit confused, Rx is going to be negative 64. And the Y value is going to be the same as it was up here. Okay, so random range from 100, room height minus 100. So looking at this here, the X is going to be negative 64, which is somewhere along this line here. And the Y value will be between here and here. So the tank can appear anywhere in here, straight up and down. And then lastly, the bottom coordinates, which is 4. The Y value is just going to be room height plus 100 or plus 64. So now what's going to happen is that's going to spawn a new tank, and then after it spawns a new tank, I'm going to set a new alarm. Now, if I want a new tank to be appearing every 2 seconds, that's going to be 120 steps. So I set alarm 0 to 120, and then it will create a new tank every 20 seconds. So now all I need to do is put this in the room. Now I'm going to delete these tanks because they're going to be not randomly created. They'll be created on that timer. What am I looking for? Objects. and I select the tank controller. Now it doesn't have a sprite, so I'm just going to put it in the top left corner of the room here. I don't want to put it outside the room because every time I exit this, it'll ask me if I want to delete things outside the room. So I'm just going to put it in the top left corner. It's got a little question mark on it, and mousing over it shows me down the bottom here what it is. Unfortunately, that is one of the frustrating things in GameMaker. If you have multiple controller objects, you have to mouse over them to see what they are. And I'll go play. So we'll test this out. We'll make sure we've got no errors. Okay, so that tank came straight in, and there's another one coming in over there. Now this seems pretty easy, so let's speed it up a bit. What we're going to do in the create event here is we're going to have a script that says timer. And this timer is going to equal 120. Then in this code, this is just going to be my variable, init variables. I'm going to make it so at the end of here, reduce the timer. And timer minus equals 1. So it's going to get constantly faster and faster and faster. However, we do want to have a limit. So I'm going to use clamp. I'm going to clamp the timer. The minimum is going to be 60. The maximum is going to be 120. So it's going to start at 120. It will never get lower than 60. You may have seen in other tutorials something like this. If timer is greater than 60, timer minus equals 1. And that's fine as well. However, it doesn't really account for errors where it may go below 60 for some other reason. You may have other code elsewhere. But what clamp does is it makes sure if it's ever below 60, it's going to set it to the minimum. If it's ever above 120, it's going to set it to the maximum. So it will keep this number here in between these two values. So we can test this quite easily. I'm actually going to reduce the timer by a bit more. I'm going to reduce it by 10. No, I'll reduce it by 5. Just so I can test it. I won't have to play it for too long to see that it gets quicker every time and more tanks will appear. Okay, so I've got this tank appearing up the top here. And then over here. And very shortly there should be a new tank every 1 second. And I'm going to need like a power up or something that increases my turn speed. So you can see the tanks are coming a bit faster now. If I remove this clamp, you'll see very quickly what happens. So I'll just count down manually. So the timer is at 120 at the moment. And now it should be at about 115 and then 110, 105, etc. And it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. It's probably at about 90 now. And unless I've made a mistake somewhere, I should just get hundreds of tanks coming in really soon. But it doesn't seem to be that way. So, it doesn't actually seem to be working at the moment. So what I'm going to do is, I know exactly why. This bit here, I don't want to set it to 120. I want to set it to timer, which is the variable that I've created. Okay, so by testing it, I saw that there was an error here. It wasn't doing what I had told it to do. And this is a logic error. Okay, the program was running exactly as I had told it to run, but it wasn't doing what I intended it to do. And so that is a logic error, my logic, in not actually coding it right. There was nothing that was going to cause the program to crash. It's just every time I was using a hard value of 120 instead of the derived value from the timer. So now it should get fast relatively quickly. And I shouldn't have to play long before I just get loads and loads and loads of tanks coming in. You can see there's a lot more than were here before. At one point, I'm not sure what happens if the timer goes negative. I think the tanks may just stop coming. Yep. And that's why I would use clamp. So I'm going to clamp that back in there, and I'm going to change that back to 1, so it's a slower build up. It gets harder and harder and harder rather than just kind of easy and then difficult. And now it will never go below 0. So when my timer was in the negative number, every single step, what happens is the timer is automatically reduced by 1, and then when it gets to 0, it triggers. But if it's already below 0, it's not going to keep triggering again and again and again. So that should be all good. We should have a endless little shooter, an endless onslaught that gets fairly difficult with 1 tank per second. Now, with your turrets spinning like it is, if you didn't watch the, I didn't actually do that video, but if people were after it, then ask me. I did do the code to make the turret rotate slowly on my one, but it was quite complicated. For example, where is it? It's in the step event. I need to put this in here. Lose the game if no health. It's this bit here. So as you can see, it was quite, I mean, it's not a lot of code, but it is quite complicated to understand what's going on here with absolute values and the calculations that are being made and what's actually happening. So, I mean, if you want to use that code on there, you can pause the video by all means, copy that code across. It's not something that, this is something that's quite complicated. It wouldn't be accessible. It wouldn't be asked of in an assessment because the logic here is quite difficult. So feel free to copy that code if you want to make your turret turn slowly. You will need to also add in a turret speed variable in there. So next video, we'll have a look at some power-ups and what are called Boolean values. At the moment, we've only really covered integers, whole numbers. And we've also covered floating, well, we haven't covered floating point variables, but we have used them because this bit here, not this bit, the part where you've got your rotation towards the mouse, the point direction returns a floating point value. So that is one with decimal places in it. I haven't really covered that yet. So next video, we'll look at some different types of variable types. So Boolean is going to be one, and also string.